I'm Dr. Alan Lai, in charge of Health Economics and Management Institute in ESSEC Business School, Asia Pac. So without further ado, let's welcome our keynote speaker for tonight, Mr. Arnaud Vaissie, to give us a vivid presentation, and let's give him a big applaud.
Thank you. So, thank you, Dr. Lai. And when you called me, I mean, clearly, first of all, it was a call coming from ESSEC. So I had to say yes, because I'm very, very keen on ESSEC and the development of ESSEC. But second, the fact that it's a full 100 meters from our office is a serious advantage. You can, you don't need any alcohol test. But I'm sure that tonight most of you would like to know what is the key recipe to become an entrepreneur. And by the way, I'd like to know it as well for the future. Unfortunately, there is no cookbook. But I think we have a few key elements. The first one is to have an idea. The second is to take the first step to make it real. And the third one is that you need a favorable business environment. If you don't have any one of these three, I think it's unlikely that it's going to work. But once you have all of this, after that, and this is maybe what I'm going to talk about today, it's going to be telling you the good and maybe the bad, and certainly not the ugly, about International SOS. So welcome to you all. My name is Arnaud Vaissié, and I'm the co-founder with Dr. Ehem, who is on the back row over there, and the real culprit behind this business, the co-founder of International SOS. And my topic today, as you can see it, is from social innovation to corporate entrepreneurship. First of all, I'd like to give you the context in which we created International SOS. And then maybe I'll talk about the story of the company. And lastly, we'll deal with the cross-cultural environment and cross-cultural issues related to doing business in Asia. We talk about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, but tonight I'm going to be very biased. I'm going to see it in the eye of International SOS. So, what is International SOS? International SOS, as the name suggests, is an international organization dedicated to provide services, medical and security services, to business people living or traveling outside of their home country, and to employees on remote locations. This is what I will be speaking about for around 30 minutes. If I go beyond, please ring the bell. By the way, thank you for the SOS. You know that the first SOS ever sent out was for the Titanic. And so I always hope that the end result for International SOS may be slightly different. But so what's the context? The context, we created the company in the mid-80s, as you said, in 1985. And International SOS is fundamentally the child of the globalization of business. The business, if you're far too young to remember this, but in the mid-80s, corporations were primarily domestic corporations. Even multinational corporations were actually hugely domestic. General Electric, which was a giant already then, had more than 70% of its employees in the US. And the remaining part was really in Europe and Japan. Besides that, it was pockets of people. So for French multinational corporations at the time, you were talking of your Far East representative. He was a guy who was more into relationships than he was really into P&L management. So But of course, that was the start of internationalization. And someone was also internationally drafted. Pascal was drafted by the government for his military service to go to Indonesia to create a clinic at the Indonesian embassy in Jakarta. Our president at the time was supposed to come and, of course, needed the best medical care, so they elected Pascal to make sure that the injection would be done in the right way. But MNCs were starting to come to Asia and to Southeast Asia, in particular on the commodities side and infrastructure. And sure enough, our first clients were Mobil, British Petroleum, Schlumberger, and other corporations working and dealing with commodities. So what was the idea? The idea was to provide medical services to the employees, and in particular the expatriate employees of those corporations operating in Indonesia primarily, and offering those employees two types of services. One, a house call service with physicians in Jakarta, and second, medical evacuation capability within Indonesia and to Singapore. Since back then, Singapore was better medically than Indonesia. Things may not have changed. So this was the idea behind what we started. And actually we were reasonably lucky, because since then, globalization of corporations has increased continuously. The share of world trade has always been superior to world trade growth every year, ever since, with the exception of 2 years of financial crisis. So therefore, the need to support the internationalization of corporations has continuously increased. But the needs evolved, and in particular, we didn't get it right in the first place, so we had to change and to have a very fast evolution of our business model. And the needs of corporations, so from support of their expatriates, has evolved into what is today a duty of care. And the duty of care is the fact that corporations have to offer their employees programs and solutions so that when they travel, medical and security risks are being manageable. And they have to do it through programs prior to travel or expatriation. Travel could be domestic, could be international. They have to do it through solutions and services which are available as and when a problem occurs. And of course, through crisis management capabilities. And this duty of care evolution has spread throughout the Western world first, but is now coming to Asia, and we are seeing it becoming bigger and bigger. Of course, we've helped to provide the solutions, but we've also helped develop the concept. So it is part a solution offering, part a conceptualization of a need. And the country which is today the most advanced in this regard is Canada. Canada has just passed legislation stating that any Canadian employee or employee of a Canadian corporation, more importantly, needs and must have access to the same kind of level of care in terms of security and medical services as he would if he were in Canada. So it's a very, very high threshold which has been set in Canada for Canadian corporations and employees. But you have now case law across the world which is saying pretty much the same thing. And we, International SOS, we are there to help corporations develop these capabilities. It's interesting to see that it's not only developed world requests we see now, and we've been in China for a long time, that in China, you have the Chinese, the large, the advanced multinational Chinese corporations are now having a real view on providing quite an advanced level of care to their employees outside of China. And in particular, when they go to Africa, because the Chinese have realized that medical care in Africa can be challenging. So, so we had the right idea, I think, which was to provide these solutions to multinationals. And in providing the consulting and the services, we've created a framework. And the beauty is that it's gone from multinational corporations to government organizations, which are very large clients for us, to SMEs, because actually now SMEs are international organizations. It's going international, exporting is not anymore the remit of only large organizations. And this globalization, the increase of FDI, the increase of travel, is growing year on year, with a few exceptions. When you had SARS, or when you had the Iraq wars, or the financial crisis, then you see, or 9/11, you see a dip for a few months, usually 6 months. But after 6 months, international travel comes back up, and global trade as well. So it is a very deep and solid foundation for us. That's the context which has allowed us to develop. Maybe in a second part, I would like to tell you the story. So the story evolves around innovation. But in order to develop, you need to have a competency, you need to have adaptation, and continuous evolution. And the competency, I think we started off with a competency, and the beauty of this competency is that it was not mine. So, and still is not, by the way. But what is this competency? It is that in France, there has always been a very high level of expertise in the medical emergency field. This is linked to world wars. I mean, you know that the French love going at war. We don't win every time, I must admit. But therefore, we have very advanced medical services in the military. From the military side, a bit like the US with the internet, we developed in 1945, after the war, a social security system, which is called SAMU. And what is SAMU? It is to put physicians in ambulances or trucks. And those physicians go to the site of the patient, whether it's home or whether it's on the street on an accident place. So we are used to have physicians coming to the location. So that was the social system. Still is true to this day. Of course, from a government system, you create a private system. And generation 3 was made of doctors going private and convincing insurance companies to create a travel insurance with a service which would be called an assistance service. And the origin of these travel insurance products is really French, and the level of service which is the most advanced has been provided by French companies at the beginning. And we are generation 4. We transformed, together with Pascal and all of my colleagues here, we transformed what was an insurance concept into a human resource issue. We convinced employers that actually you shouldn't entrust your insurer to deal with what is key for you, which is your employees. You need to be coming up with programs, policies, processes which fit the corporation and where the corporation is the decisive player and not an external player. And when we draw all these programs for multinational corporations, we are their advisor. We tell them what we think they should be doing. In the end, it's always them deciding. It's a bit like the pilot on a flight. You can advise the pilot, but the captain does make the decision. So a competency. Then you need adaptation. In our case, I mean, we got it wrong in the first place with our doctor's house call, fabulous service in Jakarta. You could secure a very well-trained physician coming to your place for a very reasonable price. Fabulous program, nobody called. So a bit of a cultural issue. And what was it? It is that in France or continental Europe, you do call doctors to come to your place. In Asia and in the Anglo-Saxon world, you do not. You crawl to the emergency room. But you do not dare call the physician to your place. So even if you had the best one in the world ready to come to you, he doesn't show up. He's not being called. So we had very quickly, because of course we were small at the beginning, to change the model from a house call model into what Asia is used to, and the Anglo-Saxon world is used to as well, which is an emergency room setting. So we created quite a nice emergency room with great capabilities in Jakarta, and this became the hub together with the medical evacuation service, and we sold a membership to multinationals in order for them to have access to this service. Again, not an insurance, it's a service, it's fee-based. So the evolution needs to be the adaptation needs to be instant, and evolution. So we started with actually a relatively narrow range of services. But if you want to grow, you need to grow, and most particularly for a service company. I know nothing about manufacturing, let me tell you. And whenever I'm being asked, which is very rarely, I provide the wrong advice. On the services front, you expand in following your customers. It's the dynamics between customers' requests and your own ideas, which is really creating the continuous change. And in our case, so we started with this small range of services, and we developed a full medical vertical for multinational corporations. So that today, we are providing on-site services. For example, the largest client we have in this regard is in Papua, where we are managing the medical care of 100,000 people, from tribes with bones in their nose, which requires a specific medicine, to the local population based in Papua, to expatriates coming from Asia, Australia, and the US. And all of this in an environment which is as complex as it can be, going from sea level through the second thickest jungle in the world to 4,000 meter high, where the mine, the largest copper, open pit copper and gold mine in the world is. So an extraordinarily complex environment. We have managed for now 20 years all the medical care for the population and created public health, and basically we are the Ministry of Health over there, and we're also the service company. And we do that around the world. We do that on rigs for rigs offshore Thailand, Malaysia. We do that in China. We do that everywhere. I think we've got more than 800 locations in the world in which we are providing these kind of services. There's a lot of telehealth, a lot of IT-related services. So following this vertical, then we have all the assistance services going from so the calls into the assistance centers, one of which is 100 meters away. So you could, and that's very unique to you, not call but walk to the assistance center. But that's not part of the business model. These assistance centers are staffed with physicians, with security specialists, answering 24 hours a day. And you provide medical advice all the way to medical evacuations and huge crisis management of the most complex crisis situations in the world. Then we are also providing occupational health services for corporations with a lot of preemptive programs, e-training kind of solutions. So a lot of all-encompassing around the life of an employee kind of services. So it's a full vertical now on the medical side, offering basically corporations to outsource their medical issues to us. And we are even managing for the US Department of Defense all healthcare for the US military soldiers and their families outside of the US. So when they want spectacles or when they need medical evacuation services, they are going to call us. And then in '98, we created a second vertical, which is security. Because as you may or may not recall, Indonesia is a country which has not always been a democracy. And before, there was President Suharto. And in '97, it became very touchy. And they were close to civil war. And in '98, in June of '98, suddenly the American embassy decided to evacuate its representatives in Indonesia, and overnight the entire expatriate population wandered out. So we were used to do so. And we evacuated in 36 hours a massive number of people. And this was done by all our medical personnel and our executives. I mean, fantastic, very tense, extraordinary, we loved it. But in the end, I was told, fabulous, it's great, we're very proud of what we've done, but never again. We are medical people, we are not security people. And so from then on, we created security services, and now we have a very large security practice providing assistance security-related services through our assistance centers, information, all the way to crisis management. And we're pretty much involved in any large crisis which does happen around the world today. So this is the evolution of the company in terms of services. And then, in order to grow again, you need geographic expansion. So started from Indonesia, Singapore, then went northeastwards to all the way to China, and Japan, and down under to Australia and PNG. And we've been across Asia, and by '98, basically, we had a presence in every single country of Asia Pacific. So this geographic expansion was, of course, very challenging. The two examples are Japan and China. Japan, I tried to develop a business in Japan, and I went to see Sumitomo at the time. It was a nice meeting with very senior people, senior managing directors. A great deal of smiles, 3-hour sessions. And a month after, the same session with the general manager, 3 hours of smile and positives. And then a month after with the manager, and a month after with an assistant manager. And I stopped when I was about to be received by the head driver. But the Japanese would never say no. So and then we happened to meet this time the number 2 of Ito, which is called Itochu today, and which is at the time was the largest company on earth, more than $100 billion. That was the largest Japanese sogo sosha. And with them, they got very excited with it, and we established a company very, very quickly. But instead of going from bottom to top, it was very top to bottom. So Japan can be read in many different ways. The only thing I know about Japan is that there is not one thing that I understand. And China. China, from the very beginning, we had to go into China because the 80s is when China opened up. And China is, of course, complex today, but was even worse at the time, and basically closed to foreigners for what we were doing. So we had to manage quite a bit and find the Chinese Red Cross, Chinese Beijing City Red Cross, which is very powerful, which is headed by, at the time, the number 2 of the vice mayor of Beijing, and who had somewhat ministerial rank, and was semi-autonomous vis-à-vis the Ministry of Health, and was delighted to go against the advice of the Ministry of Health. So through that, we were able to partner which we did. We still are partners to this day, and it's been a terrific journey with China. So I would say expansion and evolution is critical if you want to grow, because today 50% of what we used to do 10 years ago, we don't do it anymore. So it's if you don't create new products and services, new solutions continuously, what you've been doing before becomes commoditized, and either the price you cannot make money anymore on the services you were offering, or the services are being distributed in a different way, and we were no longer relevant. In our particular case, it is what is being done for travelers, for tourists. It was a huge component of what we used to do. This is gone because now it's sold over the internet at a price which is basically a penny, and there is no room for service and no information, by the way, on the service which is being provided. Therefore, a company like ours, which is a high value, high quality kind of company, we no longer are relevant in this field. But I would say the third component for context in the story, but the link to a development of an organization, I think is the cross-cultural management of things, and which is both internal and external. I think to develop an organization, you need emotional intelligence. Doesn't mean that you're intelligent. Emotional intelligence can be people who are incredibly hard and tough, or can be people who are somewhat different. But in any event, I think that in developing a company, you need to convince a variety of people, from executives and, in our case, physicians joining us, and those who joined us at the beginning are among the best ones ever that have ever joined the company. You need to convince customers who by nature are skeptical with a new service and a new solution. You need to convince regulators who in the healthcare field are extremely present. I mean, insurance and healthcare and banking, I mean, financial services on the one hand, healthcare on the other, are the two most regulated industries in the world. So you need to convince them. So this emotional intelligence in our case was even more complex due to the fact that we were operating in Asia and we are not Asians, and not improved in this regard. And we are in a business which is a healthcare business where half of our employees are doctors. So we are 11,000 of sorry, not half, our medical personnel. We are 11,000 people. Out of the 11,000, roughly half, more than 5,000, are medical personnel, including 1,200 physicians working full-time for the organization. The other half is made of executives, for the most part, with very high education and very ambitious. And how do you get, how do you go about having executives and physicians working hand in hand? I could say that I have the recipe. The only thing I can say is that my white hair is a testimony to the difficulty. But it is fundamental to understand how do people function. And frankly, when you're in an academic environment, I think it's not that different, by the way. Anyone who has a specialty, a professional expertise, has a level of independence which is a bit unique. And the values by which doctors are driven is what's best for my patient. The values by which executives are going are along process, customers' expectations, budget, and a variety of other issues, whereby what's best for my patient may or may not be central to the equation. So you definitely, and you by definition, that's the story of healthcare, global story of healthcare, not only at International SOS, but everywhere, of tremendous tension between executives and physicians. In our case, we had one small advantage, is that I've known Pascal since he was 5. I was much younger, I was 4. And ever since, he never got any younger. And so then he became a doctor. I don't know how he managed it, but he did. And and so we've been, I mean, we've known each other forever. And so as much as I feel antagonized by his views on the way business should be driven, I try to compromise. And we've developed a system throughout the organization where clearly the line of responsibility of physician goes all the way to Pascal. Everything else goes all the way to me and Laurent Sabourin, who is the Chief Operating Officer. And in this way, I think we are managing the tension. We are not getting the tension to disappear. We are just managing it. And I think that one key to our success is the fact that we've managed the tension between physicians and executives in a positive way. And this is where the cultural aspect is to tell everyone that in the end, what does matter is the corporation. The common purpose is what the corporation is trying to achieve, the ethics and values of the corporation. This is really the end of the discussion. If it doesn't share the common value, then it doesn't work. And I think we are managing this. It's complicated. It's not stable, but it's a very positive environment as well, because you have very smart people challenging one another. And then on the collection of different countries in Asia, which also is a real challenge. You don't do things the same way in Japan, in China, in Indonesia, or in Singapore. It's, I mean, I'm pushing an open door, but it's a reality. And what I think there is that the leaders you put in place in all those countries need as well to understand that the commonality is the corporation. And for example, in Japan, after having partnered with Itochu, they gave us, they seconded one of their senior managers to become the head of the joint venture. This guy was very good, very smart, was able to drink every single evening, which I think is remarkable. But the fact was that he was putting Japan first, Itochu second, International SOS a distant third. And this became very complicated. And in the end, we put an expatriate, and we've been very successful. And now that we have a very stable team and Japanese managers who have been, I think, functioning with the right values, the new head is a Japanese. But it's been a long journey. In a similar way, in China, we've had expatriate managers, an Asian, a Singaporean, and a British man to manage our Chinese operations for many, many years. The idea is that it's the values of the corporation which is the alignment. Because you're not going to manage to get Indonesia to look like Singapore. Not in my lifetime. So the alignment is, of course, adaptation, but the alignment is really the values of the corporation. So I think regarding China, just 2 things, because China is so crucial to all of us and to our future. For us, it's been a long story. We started 25 years ago over there, and we've been very involved in major events. The first one has been we managed the first flight after the revolution between the mainland and Taiwan. In 2007 and 2006, we managed the first two flights. One, which was a jet air ambulance, and then second, a commercial flight with sick passengers on board. And there, you could talk about cross-cultural management. Leaving China, it was all about China being benevolent, and these patients regretting not to be treated in China, but because they were Taiwanese, they wanted to be back in Taiwan as quickly as possible, and China was accepting it. And in Taipei, of course, the story was slightly different. It was these patients are so incredibly lucky to access proper medical care. And we had to manage expectations on both sides so that it wouldn't become an issue. It was actually 1.5 years of negotiation with a multiple number of government bodies on both sides. And eventually they gave us the permission, because that was for them one step in the direction that they eventually took, which was to open flights, which happened very, very shortly after that. So the second one is that we are two heads in China, so the Singaporean, Tan Wei Wat, and British man, John Williams, who after intense coaching, training, workouts, and privately, company-sponsored physical programs, carried the torch for the Olympics for a full 80 meters, every one of them. But having two foreigners, a Singaporean and a British, carrying the torch in Beijing was quite something. And to this day, I think it's quite pleasing to know that it did happen. And all the medical checkups were positive after the event. They still are in good shape. So as a conclusion, what I would like to tell you is that the International SOS has been and still is the child of globalization. That we are there to help corporations for their global workforce and to impose programs which are now worldwide programs, because most corporations want worldwide programs. So the world is looking a bit like one place for multinational corporations. And our story has been a story of continuous innovation linked to a competency, adaptation, and new offerings. So, and that we need to have people who are adaptable to the environment and the cross-cultural issues, but who are fundamentally putting the company's values first. So in the end, I would say that corporate entrepreneurship is all about talented people driving innovation and sharing a common purpose. Thank you.
So we have Dr. Jeremy Lim and Professor Cedomir to share with us what you have learned from Arnaud's presentation and come up with your own experiences. I think Jeremy has a rich experience in medical service, and Cedomir deals a lot of cross-cultural issues. And please share with us then what you feel about from Arnaud's presentation.
Well, I think the first thing is that I feel reassured that money spent on International SOS is money well spent. In the times that I've been in remote areas, we have never had to activate SOS, but at least it gives us the reassurance that if things go wrong, we are in good hands. I have a special affection for Indonesia because I've been doing medical missions there for many, many years. In fact, in 1 year, it was in 1998, I think, where we did a medical mission in the Riau Islands, and there was a lot of talk around piracy. Thankfully, the partner was the Red Cross, and the patron happened to be President Habibie's sister. I shared some concerns about piracy, and for the whole 3 weeks of the project, wow, there was an Indonesian warship that was parked just outside and no pirates disturbed us. So it was quite amazing. So we did not have to activate you guys, right? But as I listen to Arnaud, really it's about the idea, and it's about taking the first step with the full knowledge that you don't know what the second step and the third step is going to look like. It's like what Chairman Mao says, cross the river by feeling these stones. And that's why the notion of values, of the common vision are so important, because you only know what the final destination is going to look like, but you don't know whether it's going to take 6 steps, a dozen steps, is it 10 years, is it 20 years? And I think it is the common passion and the alignment that will help you to carry through the day. I think that when it comes to health and to healthcare, it's really very, very unique in that health is one of those wonderful sectors where you can do good and do well at the same time, right? You don't need to be ashamed that you're actually making a decent margin, and you can still sleep well every night, right? Really, Narayana Murthy, one of the Infosys founders, once said that the softest pillow is a clear conscience. I think there are only a few sectors where you can genuinely say that I've done my best, I've saved lives, I've made the world a little bit better, and my wallet is a little bit fatter. So it is a great sector, okay? And that's partly why it's very easy to attract very, very passionate, mission-driven people into healthcare. One of the biggest challenges, other than herding cats, meaning managing doctors, and especially academic doctors. So those of you who are in academic programs, or those are the hardest guys to manage. Okay, but one other point around healthcare is that it is so tightly regulated, and Anu shared that it's the idea, is taking the first steps and making sure that the business and that the environment, it is favorable. Here, I would urge you budding entrepreneurs to take the plunge, even if the environment is not very favorable, because this is a rare time in the history of the human race, especially here in Asia, that governments don't pretend to know the answers. Okay, so there is, when it comes to healthcare, we only know what doesn't work. We are very clear that, at least here, if you speak to policymakers around Asia, they're very, very clear that the welfare model is broken. It's not for us, really tomorrow's global leaders. At the same time, like I sit on the International Advisory Board for the Abu Dhabi MOH, and they are very clear that with the experience of the Arab Spring, all that matters is citizens, citizens, and citizens. Right, and this gives a lot of opportunity then to create new models. So there are no longer any real sacred cows left in healthcare. If the environment is not favorable, you have every opportunity to change it. Here in Singapore, I hate to say this, but one blogger can basically inflict so much pain and embarrassment on the entire government. It is amazing. Okay, and in fact, even in Singapore, and I will share that tomorrow I will be on TV. Okay, and it's not because I'm any particular personality, but because tomorrow the government will announce the findings of the MediShield Life Review Committee. Okay, and this has been a journey for many of us who took this first plunge more than a decade ago, saying that the Singapore model of individual responsibility was harder and harder as inequality becomes a bigger challenge, and as healthcare becomes more and more expensive. I remember I wrote my first article for the Straits Times on why we need national health insurance, and I took reference from Alan's home country, Taiwan. I said, look at Taiwan. And immediately, in typical Singapore government way, 2 articles came out after that saying what's wrong with the Taiwanese system, they're going bankrupt, right, etc., etc. So, so, but thankfully, many of us were not deterred. And as Victor Hugo says, nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And thankfully, even the WHO has really announced, and I think that the WHO Director General Margaret Chan has said this on multiple occasions, that the most powerful idea that the world of health can give to the world is universal coverage, right? And I think tomorrow, I'm optimistic that at least Singapore's taking some of these baby steps, moving a little further from the self-responsibility side of the spectrum to more one that is shared. Okay, and if even Singapore can change, the rest of the world can change. And if you have a pressing need, and healthcare is full of pressing needs, if you have a pressing need, you're prepared to take the first step, you can change the environment to make it favorable.
Thank you very much. A few words. I was very impressed by the way how Arnaud was talking about the company, about what was the journey of the company. And I started to take some notes about what are the managerial concepts I could ask him about. So I started to list them, and after 15 minutes I abandoned them. So many. So it is amazing how in a 1 hour talk you were talking about many, many issues which are pertaining to the business problems that we know today. I will start with the first one concerning the different elements for the entrepreneurship, and you mentioned the 3 of them, the first one being the idea, second one being the first step, and third one being the adaptation to the environment. So the question is very much for the business schools, can we teach entrepreneurship? This is a big question, because when you mention these 3 elements, the idea, it's very hard to teach the idea. Concerning the first step, this is something that maybe we can. And concerning the adaptation to the environment, there are so many environments that it is very difficult to do so. So this is a constant problem that we can have in a business school. Can we teach entrepreneurship? And we established, for instance, at ESSEC, the so-called incubators. So the incubators are here in order to help students who would like to launch their own company. But we also have many people who would say, I will never go to a business school because there is nothing for me to learn there. I will learn on the spot. I will learn from life and not from a business school. It's fair enough. So it is a constant problem that we can have concerning the entrepreneurship. Can we teach such a topic, or would we leave people to decide by their own and learn by their own and crawl in order to find the real thing? I accepted with pleasure to come here because, of course, the French specialty concerning emergency solutions is very, very old. And when I was student, it was a long time ago, I used to work for another company which is called Europe Assistance. And I like it very much, the night shifts at Europe Assistance. So we work only in the night with the problems that we can find in the night. But since it was for the world, not for France, since it was for the whole world, the calls were at 1 p.m. in this country, 10 a.m. in another country, and so on. So it was very, very interesting to work in this field, because emergency is a particular subject. When people call you, they have a problem, and you have to solve the problem immediately. And this is something that we are learning also on the spot. And I remember all the time when I did not solve a problem, my supervisor told me, I will not solve the problem at your place. You have to solve it by yourself. It took me a few minutes in order to find it out, but next time I was more confident in order to do it. So the emergency is something that is extremely interesting to look at, so I advise all people, if you have the possibility to work in an emergency service, please do it, and you will see what is the emergency thing that you have to provide. The second reason why I'm coming here is that I'm taking the bad side to ask hard questions. So don't fire me immediately. You can do it afterwards. I listened carefully to your presentation. So I will start with the first question. When you listed the different elements concerning the entrepreneurship, there was one element that you did not list, which is chance. Do you think that the chance to meet the people that you work with, the chance that you had the idea at that time, the chance that you proposed the idea at this place, is something relevant in entrepreneurship? Or do you think that chance does nothing to do in this? And after that, I will ask some few other questions.
I think it's a very good point. This is what I try to say, partly in saying that you need a favorable business environment. In our case, the chance was that we started off in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, and Singapore has seen unprecedented growth in all of the 80s and the mid-90s. And the day we entered the US market, which for us now is our largest market by a long way, we entered the US market the 1st of July 1998, when the financial crisis came to a complete full-blown crisis and credit was halted in Asia. So, of course, we managed the chance, but yes, you do need a favorable business environment is a combination of chance and also a good view of the situation. You know, there is this saying, which is this baseball player who said that the more I practice, the luckier I get. I think that one dimension of entrepreneurship, which I didn't mention, is a huge amount of work. And frankly, for many years, we work 7 days a week, and then 6.5 days, and then 6. And so it's I think entrepreneurship, because the odds are stacked against you, because by definition you come up with a new product. If you don't have innovation, you're not relevant. You come up with a new product, you're coming up against established players who are going to try everything they can to prevent you from growing. So I think that hard work, I believe, is more important than luck. But luck is part of life for all of us. A bit is necessary.
Okay, my second question is, since you are dealing with doctors, this is a particular population. Because very often people say that professors have a big ego, you know? But sometimes doctors have a bigger ego than we do, you know? So my question is, when you're dealing with different countries, this population of doctors, is it different from one country to the other, or do you feel that they practically behave the same way?
This is the fascinating thing about physicians, is that my discovery is that physicians look alike the world over. You have more similarities in between a US cardiac surgeon and a practitioner in Indonesia, and hell knows that their levels may be different, than you have between a US cardiac surgeon and a US executive. So doctors, and I think that it is fundamentally linked to the training. What is the training of a physician? It is that it's you're there to help people and save lives in the absolute, but B, the way you do it on a one-on-one basis. You perform an instant diagnosis, and you come up with execution instantly through a prescription or procedure. Whereas when you are an executive, whenever there is an issue, it takes time to be identified, and it takes a committee and meetings and many meetings and many months to look at it, and execution may or may not happen. And this is why now I have 29 years behind me of having been called seriously incompetent by my physician colleagues.
One last question. We know that in a certain number of countries, especially in emerging countries, corruption is plugging everything, including the healthcare system. So in that case, when you go to some countries and when you face very high corruption, what is your first idea? To pull out from the country, to fight with it? What is your idea about that?
This one is a fundamental value for us. And most particularly because we started in Indonesia and Singapore. Singapore is not an issue, but in Indonesia, of course, it is. So the advantage of healthcare, at least in the provision of services, and even more so emergency medical services, is that you really can pool the weight of what you do and the fact that you're not a critical business issue. You're a critical service issue. And so we've made a rule that not even the beginning of a hint would be accepted across the world. And we operate in Africa, we operate in many countries where there is an issue. And in the countries where you do have to do it, for example, in some countries, if you deal with governments, you have to accept it. We don't deal with government. We've, in the developing world, in many, many countries, we, for many decades, or many, many years, only dealt with multinational corporations. But corruption is something that the second you accept it, then the next day you have to do it because it becomes a rule across the board. And for us, the rule is absolute. It's total, absolute intolerance. And I much prefer walking out and walking away from any country than having to accept it. And in China, when we got our license, it was absolutely clean and clear. And hell, it was complicated. We got the 001 license. So did we in Vietnam. But it's I think the beauty of healthcare and emergency medical services, the flag, is that you can escape it.
So thank you. I think the story of International SOS may or may not be applicable to every sector. So we are now open to the floor and for Arnaud Vaissie to be challenged by the audience whether your story can be, or cannot be applicable to different sectors or industries. Anyone would like to raise questions to Arnaud? Yes, please identify yourself.
Hi, Arnaud. Thank you very much for your talk. I have a question. You mentioned about innovation, and one of the innovations you mentioned was you transform travel insurance from the insurance concept to human resource concept. Is there any other social innovations that International SOS has brought to this part of the world since it was founded? And also, have you benefited from the social innovations here?
So two innovations that I have in mind. First of all, we are spending 5% of our revenue. Our revenue is $1.5 billion, mostly fees, nearly exclusively fees. And we are spending more than 5% of our revenues on IT. So we are massively IT driven and developing new concepts through IT. And in this regard, we have developed the largest travel tracking software in the world. We are at the version 6, TT6, which we created at the time of the internet bubble. And through this tracking solution, which allows a company to know at any one time where their global travelers are, so they know who is on flight 777, who is in Jakarta, who is in Mumbai, who is about to come to this or that location. We've created, I think, a solution which for corporations is a fabulous tool to help their employees when they are in a dire situation. We are tracking at any one time 260,000 travelers, and I think we had 23 million individual travelers. So it's absolutely massive. And so it's innovation, IT-driven, giving a fantastic tool to corporations to help their employees. Another one, which was of a different nature, is at the time of SARS. So when SARS hit, if you remember, Asia became paralyzed because suddenly no one could be no one with the syndrome could be moved to location A to location B because of the threat of infection of either the medical crew dealing with the patient or the aviation crew. So nobody wanted to touch this patient. And I remember at the time it was quite interesting, and it shows also what competition can bring in. There was an American company which came up with the fact that they could transport SARS patients. So I was at the time in London. I called my close friend Pascal, and I said, Pascal, what are you doing? I mean, I'm reading that this American company cannot transport patients. And he said, yeah, no, we cannot. I said, fine, but this company can do it. And the instant answer of a physician is that they cannot. A physician is ready to. So in the end, he was absolutely right. They were not in a position to do so. But I said it's absolute catastrophe because our clients are saying, what are you doing? You have this US company which has this capability. Within 4 weeks or 3.5 weeks, a very short period of time, we had a team of our best aviation physicians, driven by a New Zealand doctor, teaming up with a small engineering company in Australia, and we came up with a contraption, which is a kind of a sausage, plastic made, and with reverse airflow, and we started to transport SARS patients. And so innovation came from competitive pressure and an incredible social situation, which was the threat to everyone at the time. For those of us who were in the region at the time, it was very, very serious. So yes, innovation. I mean, it's a continuous one. One today, which is very important, is everything around e-health training, which itself is changing considerably from dry training sessions being boring and that people don't feel and don't go through, into games and video and things that my children will love. So it's similarly, I think that the issue for a company like ours is to make sure that we are not going to be de-intermediated tomorrow, so that no new mechanisms are going to be launched which would make the interest for our services or the need to use our services secondary. An example is telehealth. Telehealth today is developing in a vertical manner in the United States. And therefore, it is going to develop in a vertical manner in Asia very shortly, starting with Singapore. But Singapore may, physical environment may be slightly different. But and we are working a great deal on these telehealth developments. We have quite a number of solutions already, but a fraction of what I believe we need to have to make sure that we are going to be the first to market with these new solutions, and not catching up with other people and saying, oh, we can do it as well. Because the first to market is a critical component of success today.
Do we have 2 questions here?
Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, Arnaud, thank you very much for inspiring and the provisionings. My simple question is very much with regard to what Prof was mentioning. You missed to mention about the change. Beside the change, you didn't mention at all about competition. Nothing about competition. Now, a question, and the other one is what is quite inquisitive to me. You moved with Japan, you're moving with the non-players in the marketplace. Itochu is like petroleum very much, and Sumitomo and whatever not. So the question is that you're moving away from real market player, because you mean to say there's no Japanese players in that dimension that you should partner with, or you find competition with that is a very tight one, and you have to devise a new strategy in order to move forward. Now, with regard to the Chinese too, you're working with bureaucrats. So I find it quite ironic because the chemistry seems to be quite different in terms of the Asian combination. Thirdly, with regard, when you talk about innovation, you notice that with no mention of competition or the competitors, what really missing in the industry dimension in terms of what you think that because yours is quite exclusive, unlike the Red Cross, so it is when Red Cross is very much an undeclared part of a government. So yours is rather an NGO or non-NGO, and the question is that identity-wise, you didn't mention what clear-cut identity. Are you a social medical provider, or are you a crisis-oriented organization? But you didn't mention what particularly important is that what kind of combination that make you unique that others do not come in contact to compete with your good self. And thirdly, lastly, sir, if you don't mind, I noticed one thing very obvious in terms of the 21C kind of innovation. When you talk about entrepreneurship, we are talking the 20C entrepreneurship, not the 21C entrepreneurship. Even Professor was talking about the kind of incubations, and those are yesterday's item. And the question, does your company practice open innovation? And do you encourage open innovation? And what kind of open innovation do you prefer to be? Thanks a lot.
Thank you for these very pointed remarks. So I will try to make up for what I've missed so far. On the competitive side, of course, we wake up in the morning with competitors in mind. I mean, a business who doesn't think of competition is a business which is going to have its future behind itself. So the fact is that because we've created this industry, and that I believe we are running very fast, we are creating the model. For example, we've combined security and medical on the assistance side, the IT developments that I was mentioning. It is, I believe, through innovation that we keep the competition at bay, and also through acquisitions. We are making a lot of acquisitions, but very small companies in geographies around the world, so as to get expertise and geographical capabilities. Today, there is not a like-for-like competitor, so we don't have a Coca-Cola to Pepsi, but we have gazillion competitors, products by product, service by service. Meaning Europe Assistance was mentioned. It is a competitor on the medical evacuation side. Geography by geography. We don't have a like-for-like company at this point. But when you go on the website of many of our competitors, you're going to have the feel that actually it's exactly the same as ours. Our website is copied day and night by competitors. And I have continuously my colleagues coming to me and saying, "Oh, have you looked at it?" I said, "No, I have not looked at it." So it's critical to think of competition, but also you must stay your own course, because if you're continuously distracted by competition, you zigzag and you don't run fast enough, and no, you don't stay one step ahead. And hell knows that it's complicated and how important it is, because the first to market is critical today. Not the best product is the one which is the most popular in the world today, but very often it is the first to market product. So competition is everything. What are we as an organization? We're very clear. We are a business. We are a medical business, medical services business, but a medical services business where the line between ethics and business is managed continuously in an incredibly careful way, because it's the complexity and the beauty of all medical businesses, medical related businesses, is that you're in a unique environment. You should not afford to do, or you should not do in this environment what you can do when you're selling oil or when you're selling a manufacturing product. There is a huge responsibility attached to it, and this is why in our case our physicians are independent all the way to Pascal, and all our country regional managers or the regional country managers or regional managers have a medical director with their counterpart, and they have no authority on the medical director. So it's kind of a balancing act, not always perfect, but it's very crucial. But we are a business, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've grown so much, and we intend to keep growing fast in the future, is that we look at things as a business and we need to demonstrate results. The open innovation issue, I'm not too sure what it means in our field. For one thing, we have everyone inside the company, which is certainly pushed, motivated, and rewarded for innovation. And I can tell you that every one of our physicians has one innovation in mind. The point is that it's not one a week. So it is the management of innovation, which is more the complexity, because we, if anything, we sometimes are pushing too many things at one time, and then the result is mediocre. But I think we are totally innovation driven. What is interesting is that the bigger a company gets, the more complicated it is to develop cheap innovation. Every project becomes a massive project with a massive amount of time, and the cost escalates. That's we've seen it on telehealth, where we had developed a big project internally, and then we bought a company in Brazil, and for something which had cost a few tens of thousands of dollars, this is the tool we rolled out worldwide because it was so simple and so clear, and we had been struggling at it for a couple of years with a very large number of managers and doctors inside the organization. But I'm not too sure what open innovation would mean for us. But certainly every employee and every one of us should be interested in innovation.
Just one part, sir. Because when you talk about medical, you didn't put it quite clearly in terms of looking after the sick or the unsick. What kind of percentage within the sick and the unsick? Thanks a lot.
Actually, it's a very good question, because we are called International SOS, and so we are seen as a pure emergency response mechanism, whereas actually 80% of what we do is for people who are in perfect condition. Our job is to organize healthcare for multinational corporations, employees, or governments, or NGOs. By the way, NGOs are big clients of ours that we are helping do their job around the world. We are not the NGO, we are servicing NGOs. But we I would say 80% of what we do is for people who are, it's to create the environment so that people can be treated as and when it would be needed, or would never need treatment in the first place.
Hi, I'm Kelvin. Thank you, Arnaud, for your candid sharing. I have 3 questions. First question is with regards to partnerships, because in entrepreneurship, one of the challenges is finding the right partners. So how do you go about deciding the right partner to work with in order to ensure there's a higher probability of success? There's no guarantee, but higher probability perhaps. That's the first question. Second question is with regards to disruptive technologies or business models. What we have heard of is generally the more probable competitors. And usually when companies are hit and hit badly, it's usually by the least expected. For example, the music industry is hit by perhaps Apple, as an example. Of course, there are a lot of other examples like Kodak. Okay, I shall not list more names. So in your industry, first of all, which are the ones that you think are least likely, and yet there's a possibility that they may just hit you when you least expected? And how do you ensure that you have a continual, sustainable advantage over them? Last question is with regards to idea generation as well as optimization of resources. it's important to be innovative. It's also important to manage the resources so that you can focus on the most likely ideas. So how could you share about your process in terms of elimination and focusing on the right ideas, or at least the most likely ideas that will succeed? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Callum. I'm the healthcare lead for Asia Pac for Microsoft. We've met before, so thank you first of all. And I just have one question, actually. So before my question, a remark. I think you guys have done a remarkable, awesome job, right? Remarkable is probably not good enough. Awesome job. I see you guys now at a point where you have market access to pretty much majority of the multinational corporations, Fortune 500 companies, etc., etc. You have access. Yet you provide 2 services. The question I have is, do you get knocked on the door by your customers saying, or are they pushing you to provide more services? Because I bet I would be too, saying, I know you do 2 things, can you do more, and can you do more? You were providing one. The opportunity in Indonesia allowed you to create another service line, and now you talked about telehealth as a 3rd service line potentially, or a component to support service line 1 or 2. The question I have then is, what are the things people are asking, given you have access now, that you're saying no to? Or what are the things that you think people are not asking, but you think they should be asking? One example I can think of would be wellness. You have access. We know the wellness market could potentially be bigger than the curative market or evac market, etc. And telehealth might address that perhaps. But anyway, it's an open question. Very broad, but happy for you to answer in any way you'd like. Thank you.
The very interesting question. And Microsoft is a very good client of ours, so thank you. Actually, it's with Microsoft that I think we put in place the first questionnaire, satisfaction questionnaire. I won't give you the results. No, it was all fine. Partnerships. I think partnerships is a very important question. So first of all, you have to have the chance to be in the right school when you're 5. So for most of you, maybe not all, it's too late. But yes, you're right. For me, I've created a business where 2 of us, and then we became 3 partners. I would not have created a business on my own. And I really respect and admire people who can do it on their own, because I think that the stress level of doing on one's own must be, it's already quite something to do it when you're 2 of you, but to be alone with yourself and looking at the ups and downs of a business, because, okay, fine, International SOS is now a successful company and somewhat large, but it's been made of bumps and hits and crises and threats and the rest of it. The trend has always been good. The road has been bumpy. So to find the right partner, I think that if you can have different expertise, that's ideal. That's the partners creating a business. In our case, a physician. I was running a company in the US in the financial world, US company, part of a German group, US subsidiary. So I had a strong business experience. I think that was a good combination to start with. But the partnerships that you were mentioning are more partnerships into countries. When you move into a country, where do you find your partner? This is the most complex issue, because in particular in a developing country, whose definition is that it is not a country of law. It means that if it doesn't work out, things don't work out with your partner, you have no recourse, because you don't have a legal recourse. And to withdraw is extraordinarily complicated, and to change partners is a nightmare. So the choice of a partner when one moves into a new country is extraordinarily complex, and this is why the number 1 option and best option is to go 100%. and we do that everywhere we can. So that we of course, you don't have the same insiders track than you may have if you take a partner. But hell knows in Japan, we had it to chew, it was a nightmare, and then now we're at 100%, and it's been wonderful. So it's a country of law, Japan, by the way, French law, civil law. So selection of a partner, we have really, I think, developed quite an expertise in this regard. Very often it's doctors or physicians or medical institutions that we take. We really are extremely slow, patient, considerate, and for the most part we get it right, but we got it wrong on a few occasions, and frankly it's been bruising. So I don't have a recipe, I know of the problem. In China, I think it's been really a very nice partnership, by the way, with the Red Cross, because they are physicians, bureaucrats. You're right, but physicians with real interest in developing their expertise and coming from not much to now very, very interesting capability. Regarding disruptive technologies, this is of course my obsession. And not only me. You're right, very often disruptive technologies come from people that you don't have a clue about. That's exactly what disruptive is all about. So if one could figure out that there is a disruptor somewhere, we would disrupt him before he disrupts us. But I'm not sure that we are able to disrupt the disruptor on time. So we just can watch continuously, and the beauty of being with physicians, and we have a lot of engineers as well, is that physicians are very, very interested in technology, and so coming up with all kinds of ideas continuously in this regard, and so we are being made aware. Then comes what to choose. What do you pursue? If you pursue too much, you pursue nothing. And for example, our travel tracker thing, which with the latest version TT6 is terrific. We were a bit slow in coming up with TT6. We enjoyed TT5 a bit too long, and we were slightly behind the curve, and now we're massively ahead. But we had to inject a lot of financial resources and management resources in order to come back on top. So that was a very good lesson learned. So selection, I mean, it's experience and mistakes. You know that any good manager is only coming through having made a huge number of mistakes, and I can claim responsibility for most of them. So we have an internal process, of course, but is it unique, special, better than anyone else? I don't know, frankly. So are we with two services only? Yes and no. We are, I said, a medical vertical. The medical industry is the biggest industry in the world. The size of the medical industry is bigger than the size of all manufacturing in the US. So medical industry is by nature the biggest industry. And we have a full vertical going from occupational health to assistance services, to on-site services, to public health, so we are involved in something which is bigger than we can bite. So we have already a universe which is absolutely massive. So yes, and Microsoft in particular came to us to work on services for automobiles, and we looked into it and said, it looks terrific. The numbers with Microsoft, it's always a few hundreds of zeros besides the one. So it was looking very attractive. But in the end, we didn't go for it because we already are absolutely overworked. Actually, we did win from the Ministry of Manpower. We did win an HR fair practice issue, which was great because I know that one of the problems facing the company is that people are really working very, very hard and maybe on the edge too hard. So we've got to be very selective. I think with this medical vertical that we have, it's already absolutely gigantic. And wellness in particular, we are very involved in wellness because occupational health is a great deal about wellness. So we are very seriously involved into wellness solutions. This being said, we have one service which I have not mentioned so far, and which is linked, which is slightly off mainstream, and calling on what you're saying, which is the concierge services. We are the worldwide provider leader in the provision of concierge services to banks and credit card companies. And why did we come all about this? Is because in the beginning, the credit card companies like Visa and others were offering medical assistance services attached to concierge. So if we wanted to be their vendor, we had to provide the combination. And so in the process, we have become the biggest concierge provider in the world. And it's still attached to medical assistance, but it's become a bit of a separate thing. I'm not sure that when you go to a corporation, a gigantic, I mean, we have 75% of the top 1,000 corporations as our clients in our field. But those corporations are so gigantic that I'm not sure that because we provide services on the medical side, we are going to be relevant to another side of the business with different managers, different divisions, different everything. So I think we need to stick to our medical vertical with these additional security services and run as fast as we can in this field, which is changing by the day. Healthcare is the field which is changing as quickly as, for example, smartphones, but without people realizing it. It is changing, but it's changing under the hood. But if we don't change fast enough, no matter what access we have with customers, we could lose it.
I think some of you are preparing your questions, but I'd like to get Jeremy Lim to engage with Arnaud's points about the three pillars of innovation, which are, the first one is competency identification, the second one is adaptation and continuous revolution. From your consulting firm perspective, you are providing consulting service to a lot of multinational organizations. Do you see the same components in these innovation pillars? Can you comment on this?
Actually, like as the business school professors teach, there is a lot more commonality between cardiac surgeons in one country and another country. Same for really executives. Maybe I'll like to spend a bit of time really talking about partnerships, and I am so glad that Arnaud is an honest business leader. Those founders who write who write biographies that have eyes every other word, they're all lying. Okay, nobody succeeds without partners. Okay, and the best partners in the healthcare world are those where you have partnerships of mutual dependence, mutual understanding, and mutual respect. And as one of really as a doctor who has some business background also, what we are increasingly finding very useful to our clients is to organize formal business training for the doctors, going to guys like ESSEC and really so on, to say that before you move from a really 10 clinic practice to a 50 clinic practice, you're going to partner with a private equity firm and so on. Start learning the language, start learning how the corporate world works, right? And on the other side, and I think that really Medtronic does it very well. If you go to one of these Medtronic, really, it is almost like a love fest. They'll bring a patient who will share about the experiences. If you've been to one of these mega churches, it's really very, very similar. And that inspires the non-medical people that I'm part of this mission. And there's a very famous anecdote that comes out of the Mayo Clinic where a guest comes and asks the janitor, what's your job? Because the Mayo Clinic is very proud that its motto is very focused, very single-minded. The needs of the patient come first. So a guest comes and asks the janitor, what is your job? He says, my job is to reduce hospital-acquired infections. Right? And the ability to relate and to get this understanding is what is the basis for these very deep and meaningful and commercially very, very successful partnerships. Right? So I'm with you all the way. I think doctors are not as bad as you make us out to be, right? Right? And the joy of really medicine is that most of us are actually quite clever, and when the environment changes, I think doctors change very, very quickly also.
On this, I absolutely agree. Doctors are very smart, adapt very quickly. And my father was a doctor and a surgeon, so I must say that, no, I think that working with physicians is fascinating because of the adaptability of physicians. What is complicated from a corporate standpoint is the degree of independence that any physician requires. That's the but I completely support what you've said, and we've got to go through continuous iterations of adaptation.
Excuse me. Thank you, Arnaud. Thank you so much. My name is Richard Hoon, and
I know of you.
Thank you, Arnaud, for sharing so eloquently and so frankly with us. I can attest to the fact that everything that Arnaud say, most of it is true. And for those that
20 rule.
and for those that is not true, it's because he have understated and overstated the facts. And I think there's a great humility in what he has done. And I can say that because I had a chance to work under Arnaud for many years when the company was a lot smaller, and to have seen it grown successfully, it is my greatest pride and joy as well. So congratulations on the success of International SOS.
Thank you, Richard. Richard used to be our general manager here and did a fantastic job, but then he decided that entrepreneurship was so much better than being part of the corporation. And he, in turn, became a very successful headhunter.
Thank you, Arnaud. And I had the chance to learn from the best, you know. Now, my question is this. I think for SOS to be so successful in 30 years, as you look forward, I think a great mark of an organization is probably to have a chance to cross the centurion mark, to be a 100-year-old company, and to ensure legacy, to ensure continuity, and the concept is viable beyond the founders of the company. So I'd like to just understand your mindset, whether as you look forward to International S in the future, what do you see are the threats, both external and internal, that could jeopardize this vision of seeing SOS being a legacy company in many years to come?
It's a very important question for us, and now it's actually a very interesting question for anyone who wants to start a company, because the difference in between 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and 5 years ago and now is that whenever there is a nice concept generated, there are tremendous number of people who are ready to buy the company. And therefore many startups, successful startups, are being sold right away because there is this appetite of existing companies to buy them. And why do you have this appetite? Because all existing organizations are terrified of becoming not relevant in the near future. And so they gobble up new startups in order to have, you know, this blood transfer, which is to keep you young and fresh. So the legacy of the company, I mean, the company is 1.5 billion today. It should be twice as big within 5 years. What is going to be? What is what is the chance that it's not going to happen? A lot. I mean, I don't believe in any complacency there. It's not because it's happened in the past that it will happen, and in the future, we are seeing company after company, some of which were mentioned earlier. Beautiful companies with certainly very smart people and dedicated and passionate, and suddenly through senior people mistakes or a drastic change of environment, they became very problematic very quickly. So for us, it's like looking at competition. I think having the statement, we are going to have a legacy. I'll tell you that in 5 years, for the past 5 years. It's, but it's the work of every day to start to stay credible, relevant with good products and services, knowing that a customer expectations only go higher. And it's not because a customer likes you today that he is going to like you tomorrow. It's there is no stickiness any longer from customers. If suddenly they have a better product, okay, they'll give you a chance, maybe, or they won't give it to you. But it's so the world has really changed. It's really getting faster. It's harder. I always come back with this thing that when you look at for many decades, you only had roughly 200 or 300 million people who were developing the business around the world. Suddenly, now you have 4 or 5 billion people accessing education at the highest level. And within the next 20, 30 years, that's going to be the case. Or at least the selection process will be among the 4 or 5 billion people. So the capabilities which are going to be generators are just incredible. And you have, I mean, look at what Singapore has been able to do with such a small population. It's just extraordinary. And imagine that you have 200 Singapore there in China, 200 Singapore in India, accessing education and ambitious, hardworking, and ready to go. It's the challenge to meet, to me, is enormous. This being said, I'm completely positive about it. I think we've got the right strategies. We've got the right products and services. We understand our customers. We go completely ballistic when we lose a customer. I think so long as this is there, we'll keep leading the pack. It's just that I always say that it's not because you have had success in the past that success is guaranteed in the future. It's a everyday struggle.
Do we have more questions from the floor? Oh, yes. Please identify yourself.
Good evening, Mr. Vaissie. I'm one of your 11,000. I'm working for International SOS for less than 2 years. One is when I saw the title of this evening session, I felt something a little bit like fresh, because it's entrepreneur. For us, you're a founder, but International SOS is not a new startup company. For my view, is the International SOS MNC, so it was quite fresh view to know you as an entrepreneur. You're founder for us. So now there's some discussion about working with physicians. The one that I would say advantage of a prestigious working in this company is that we met so many great people as a colleague. They are the physicians. It's quite amazing that they themselves are risking a life to reach where the patients are. So it's not sitting in the white wall waiting for people to come. Same as a security specialist, it's really, we should alert recently for example, Bangkok. Everyone's leaving the Bangkok, our security guys is heading towards Bangkok. So we're talking to these guys as same colleagues is really, really amazing. That's one of my prestigious to work for this company. My question is how the International SOS attracts such talented people with high passion to help the other, and how to keep the talent.
So first of all, in changing your impressions so that we are not a multinational company, but an entrepreneurial company. It's a very interesting point of yours. So I think we will have to think it through. And it's for sure that when you're leading an organization, you still see it in your eyes, and it's very interesting and very critical to see it in the eyes of others. And fair enough, people who join us today, they are joining an MNC. We are in 76 countries. We are 11,000 of us. But we must promote and push this entrepreneurial value. And therefore, there is more work to be done in this regard. Thank you for what you said about people who are passionate. A dimension of the company is that, yes, we are working in very complex countries. For example, we are in Afghanistan, we are in Iraq. We are working on very complex situations, the biggest crisis in the world. And our doctors, our security people, our staff in general, are involved in risky situations, but we manage those situations as well. I think we have their internal processes. We have a very strong security department, in-house security department. We really are managing crisis in a way that we are reducing the exposition of our staff to the absolute minimum. And when it's really something which we don't believe we should be in, then we call on other companies to help us. And we have them handy so that they can support us. We direct, but we don't do it ourselves. Altogether, that's the challenge. I mean, we are in a highly competitive environment, highly changing environment. We will keep staying on top only so long as we keep attracting the best, whether it's on the medical side or whether it's on the executive side, and the best around the world. So that's why it was so interesting for us to get this fair practice award in Singapore, because it's one more way of attracting the best Singaporeans to our organization. So it's the quality of the people and then the values. I think that a company is living by its values. Every company has a set of values, and that's why actually when organizations recruit to compete with you and take people out of one organization and go to the other, for the most part it doesn't really change the landscape, because the set of values of one company is not the same as the other one. And it is the people and the values, it's these dynamics which is really creating and fostering the proper environment. And we have, I think, to keep managing this very positive environment, which doesn't go unchallenged, but which again is, and that was my conclusion, it's this common purpose. So long as there is a common purpose, we share the same purpose, which is in whatever we do to help people and to put our clients first in an intelligent way, not in a naive way. And that cooperation and network, that no single operating entity is crucial for us. It's the network which is really the strength and our value, and the competitive barrier for our competitors. Because everyone can compete on anything we do, no one can compete on the globality of our network. And the globality of this network is linked to shared values. And I think that the fundamental issue is to convince people who join us on those shared values, and if we cannot convince them, to let them go.
Do we have more questions from the floor? Oh, still have one.
You mentioned, I mean, one of the sub-themes I could get was perseverance in entrepreneurship, because you mentioned the challenges in China and Japan. As an entrepreneur, did you ever feel the tension between the business side and the medical side to throw in the towel, or to say, oh, we still need to go the extra mile and see what the horizon will be?
Frankly, I don't think so. I think the value of the organization is this tension, but it's also this these opportunities we give physicians. The second, our physicians, the story changes with our physicians. And suddenly they know that we are not driven by really these very, very strong medical ethics, but we are driven exclusively by budget issues or other issues, and they know that they cannot do anything about it. Then suddenly the key value of the organization may disappear. So I think that it is to the interest of the organization to be absolutely focused and doggedly, I would say, focused on maintaining this balancing act. The issue is more with clients. How do you set quality versus costs? And how do you represent it to clients? Because it's a very